Bad news for veterans in the midst of the VA scandal. Veterans in Alabama now have less help when it comes to getting the care that they need and deserve. Now, what do I mean? Well, 17 VA offices have closed around the state of Alabama, making it much more difficult for veterans to go and get care. Now, these offices help eligible veterans apply for and receive their claims. Now, that's, of course, very, very important. You can't get help if your claim hasn't been processed. Now, there's a spokesman for these VA hospitals, or these VA offices. Spokesman Robert Horton said that, quote, the workload facing the VA offices are increasing because of so many soldiers returning home from Iraq and Afghanistan, as well as the aging population of those who served in Vietnam, Korea, and World War II. Now, here in America, we're really good at making veterans, but not so good at taking care of them. So why did Alabama close these VA offices? Well, that's sort of along that line of thinking. The Alabama Department of Veteran Affairs states that they had to close these offices because of severe funding cuts. Just in the last 2 years, Alabama legislators have cut funding to the Alabama VA system by nearly 50%. Now that is incredibly shameful. But I want to get into what else is shameful. And what else is shameful is the man that Alabama sent to Washington, D.C., and that would be Senator Jeff Sessions, who routinely votes against funding these programs to help veterans. But he has no issue sending them off to war. Now, he was one of 3 senators that voted against a recent bill to expand health care options for servicemen and women. But I'll go into that legislation later. That's our good news. The overall point is that Alabama is Republican-controlled in all 3 branches, and the fact is that you can see where their priorities lie when they're in power with the things that they do. And what they've done is cut funding to vital services that our servicemen and women and veterans depend on. Like I said, they have no issues with sending off our men and women to war. It's just when they come back that they have a problem. It's essentially a military dine and dash, but with some serious consequences. Now, what do you guys think about this?
Listen, this is what's really depressing about this is when I saw this on the docket tonight to go over. We're having the exact same thing happen here. So in Canada, the Veterans Affairs Minister they've closed down some of these offices in the great quest for efficiency, and the veterans are fighting back, and we've had some real train wreck PR from our government on it, where they've legitimately not met with them and actually had like confrontations. Which, as a politician, the greatest thing you can possibly do is argue with a veteran on camera. That's good stuff. So that's our conservative government right now doing that, though. And they're, of course, the same ones that wanted to go to Iraq with America, and we voted it down because we had a liberal government at the time. They were in opposition. And then, of course, they doubled down in Afghanistan when they came to power. And Canada, for the first time, was really at war for a long period there because of Afghanistan. So over a decade they were, and that was one of the longest wars we've had as a country, and so we're having all these veterans come home. So it's the same thing here and that you're seeing there, and it is absolutely shameful. You could get into the minutia of the financing and how do you pay for it, but it's just if you're going to do these things overseas, you're going to send an army there. They need to be taken care of when they get home, and there's really no words for how shameful it is, especially when I'm sure the same thing happens in the States as it does in Britain and Canada, which is, every Veterans Day or here in Remembrance Day, they love to trot them out. They love to like pose in front of tanks, and they love to wear the poppy in our country. But then, somehow the poppy falls off on the way to the Veterans Office to help these people out.
Exactly. And yeah, you're right. It's once again, it's shameful, and it does happen a lot here in the States. I mean, we've seen a lot of our Republican politicians, and I believe there are some Democrats that do it, but I can't think of offhand, so it doesn't happen that often. But you'll see a lot of Republican politicians like Ted Cruz and Michelle Bachmann and Sarah Palin go out there and like, oh my God, support the troops, or you're not an American. But then the first thing that they do when they get back into the Congress chamber is cut VA benefits.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh, well, I guess I see how you're supporting the troops. But anyway, let's go to Jordan next. What do you think, man?
one of the major kind of hot button issues right now is what is the role of government in healthcare, and the VA is the one full single payer system we have. Even more so than Medicare or Medicaid, because not only is it government funded, but it's government administered more or less. And so these offices that they're shutting down in the name of saving budget are the offices these are not like health clinics they're shutting down. These are the offices that help veterans find out what they're eligible for and how to get health care. These are basically this is the liaison wing of the Alabama VA, the marketing wing, if you will. I don't know if you call it marketing when it's a nonprofit, government organization, but you know what I mean. These are the guys who make sure our veterans get to the VA to get the care they're taking care of. So, of course, what do? When it's time to save money, well, let's cut that down. And now we can say, hey, look, the VA is, it's going over budget, and it's not even taking care of as many people as it should be because you cut down the wing that made sure the people knew what they could get in the first place. We saw this in Arkansas. Again, I'm sorry to always try to tie news back to my home state, but I love the place. It's what I'm going to do as long as you keep letting me. The nationwide watch private option that lasted 1 year before it almost got knocked out again. The compromise that was reached to finally get these idiots in our GOP state legislature to renew it was they gutted the funding for the marketing of it. Again, the thing that reached out to the people, these poor people that were covered and may not have even known it, Republicans said, all right, fine, we'll keep the program in place, but quit telling people they can use it, was basically the way they held it hostage. And so, that's what's going on here, and it's that's frustrating. And the other thing that's frustrating to just stop blaming conservatives for everything is and Dan got into this a little bit. This is what we do as Americans. I don't want to speak to what Canadians or the Brits do because that's those aren't my people. I don't want to point fingers, but here in America, man, again, another local example for me. There was a proposal to build a new VA clinic here in Little Rock, and it was going to go in what's kind of a nicer gentrified neighborhood. And that neighborhood rose up and said, no VA clinic in our neighborhood because they were afraid, there's a disproportionate number of the homeless in America are veterans because we send them over there and they come back broken and can't hold down a job and they end up homeless or on the streets. And these wealthy white Arkansans in Little Rock didn't want more homeless people in their neighborhood, so they said, screw this VA expansion, go fuck yourself, veterans. And that's, we've got a history of doing that in America, man. Everybody will get up and post memes on Facebook about how President Barack Obama doesn't love America or support the troops because he stood at attention and didn't put his hand over his heart. And then those same people, they'll post pictures of troops, but what they actually mean is, hey, support this troop that comes home, like you see in the movies, that comes home from war, and you pin a ribbon on his chest and you tell him how proud you are and your kids look up to him. Basically, what they have in their mind whenever they say, we need to take care of our troops after war, is this imaginary soldier that doesn't need help. The men who we send off in these, at least in our generation, these stupid, needless wars, that come back broken and just, can't function in society, then we turn around and we say, you quit feeling sorry for yourself, yada, yada, yada. You need to be stronger, represent your country better or whatever. And, we're pathetic people, man. Like, support the troops until they need support. That's really what we mean whenever we go on these flag, just lathered rants or whatever. And it's pathetic. We don't give a damn about these boys. If we did, we wouldn't have sent them over there in the first place.
Stephen.
Yeah, I mean, Jordan raised some good points there. For me, like for Republicans, and this kind of VA kind of shutting down all these admin offices, it's a triple win for them. The Republicans, they get to start as many wars as they want. They've got attention deficit disorder. They start a war and then move on to the next one without thinking about the consequences that will happen in the future with any wars that they've just started. They shut down the administration clinics, which saves money. They think, oh, that's great. And then by shutting down the administration clinics, it means that the veterans aren't even aware of what help they can get. So the Republicans don't even have to, or the government doesn't even have to pay for the help that they should be receiving. So it's like they're killing two birds with one stone there. And for the Republicans like Jeff Sessions, like I'd go as far as to say that they hate the troops because they simply don't care. I think what Jordan was saying about how they have this kind of imagined idea of what the perfect kind of what the returning soldier is like. Now it's this perfect kind of war hero, kind of 6 foot tall, got no problems, no limbs blown off, no kind of mental disorders that he's come back with. But that's not the case. What the Republicans seem to think of when they think of, oh, we've got to kind of support the troops, they're not thinking of supporting individual men and women who are serving. They just support the ideology of what the army represents. They don't care about what the actual individuals who constitute kind of make up the army. They just like the idea of the army, and that's the real problem. And people like Jeff Sessions, they don't care about the troops. They're hypocrites. They like to stand next to them, get photos with them, waving the flag and things like that. I mean, here in the UK, it's certainly not as bad as what you have in the US. When we have our D-Day memorial, and we had the 70th anniversary recently, okay, the politicians are getting that, but it's certainly not as a polarizing issue between all the parties. We just all get behind the troops, and we take care of our troops relatively well. Not as well as we should, not by any stretch of the imagination. We still have a large number of charities that do a lot of work. But Jeff Sessions, he hates the troops. He doesn't want to spend a single penny on them. He's a nasty guy.
I just think that I think you're mostly right on that. But I just want to mention how I'm pretty sure like people like Jeff Sessions and the Republicans, it's not that they hate the troops, it's just that they love the defense contractors who pay them. I mean, this comes down to we're not going to spend money on these troops, these soldiers. Who cares about them? No, I want war because I get paid from the defense contractors. And that's what it really is all about.
I just want to underline one more thing that Steven said, which is really true, and I think maybe it deserves maybe a couple more seconds here, which is that it is really threefold in favor for the Republicans, and same in our country too. And I won't even go by stripe. I'll just go by the government. They really do save money on all accounts. That's what's happening here in Canada. The veterans group were just coming out straight up saying we just stopped trying because it's become such a hassle that we've stopped trying to get benefits in certain cases, and this is where things are getting really criminal. And this ties back into the two conversations we've had already, which is debt. Like, they're not coming home to the 1950s and 60s America or even in Canada. They're coming home to a situation where it's hard to get a job. It's hard to get, to make a minimum wage. It's hard to make a middle-class lifestyle for yourself. And on top of that, we suckered them in because they were probably fairly poor off to begin with. Like, this is what's really gross is, in Canada, we had these kind of like almost video game-esque trailers that we ran in front of movies here to get people to go to Afghanistan, where it looked like you were, playing Watch Dogs or something, and that's where things are even more kind of disgusting, because it's like, we know you can't afford school, kids, so come join the army. And then when you get home, all of these things that you were promised kind of start to fall apart. And if that would be one thing, if the society itself was taking care of its people, but even if you're not in the army, you know how hard it is. So this is where I really agree with that point that Steven's making, which is we should be harder on the government. They know what they're doing, and they know that if they do these things, people will stop trying to get the benefits. And as you all said previously, that's where you start to have to go, okay, do you really support troops then? Like, are we, not just do we support them, but it is, you could make the argument, I wouldn't because it's kind of hyperbolic, but Steven's not far off with the hate, the hate the troops idea. If you're doing something specifically knowing that a guy who is probably broken trying to get money is going to stop trying, that's a severe level of douchebaggery.
Well, look, I think it's also, I do think it is hate, because the best way that you can support these troops, the best way that you can protect these brave men and women is to not send them into dangerous situations and to needless wars. Some wars do need to be fought to protect kind of the sovereignty of a nation. That's fine. We all agree that some wars have to happen. But Iraq and Afghanistan, they didn't have to happen, and certainly not to the scale that they did as well. And so these people are saying support the troops. The best way to support them is to kind of keep them at home and look after them and not send them to wars. They're actively wanting to send these men and women into dangerous situations. They're sending them to other places to get shot at. That's not a particularly kind act. I see that as somewhat of a hateful act. And so, yeah, I think Jeff Sessions hates all American troops.
I kind of disagree with the hating the troops to an extent, but I will agree that this is how sad our partisan politics culture has become. Like, listen, there's nobody on this panel is a diehard Republican, support the troops, has a bumper sticker on the car, and that's all they do, right? So I mean, all of us agree we should be helping these people. And it's just so weird that this is now also, like, taking care of a guy who came home from war is somehow a talking point to be debated now. And this is just where it seems like every time I come on this show, we have these conversations of, like, it's just step outside the box for 1 second and pretend you're an alien, right? And just think about, okay, so you had a war, yeah, and the guy came home, and the women came home, and they need health care. We should cut that. Like, what? Like, it's so absurd that you actually have to have these conversations in society that's where we're going to cut. And it just seems that, once again, we go back to the progressive media and progressives in general failing at persuading the public on this. It always comes down to the weakest in society are starting to get the cuts. And that's my line. That's just the bottom line for me. It's so depressing. Our partisan politics has got to a place where we can't all agree. Perhaps we should take care of the people that fought the war.
I'll close with this. If you're watching the show, if you're watching the replay, if you're an American, I'll let you guys throw in a plug for your respective countries if you'd like. Go volunteer at your local VA, man. Those guys, they just need all the love that they can get. I mean, I'm not a medical professional, but, I go over there and just, hang out with the guys, ask the administrator what you can do. I mean, that's what they need help with, like the non-medical stuff, the stuff that we can actually help with. And that's what supporting the troops used to mean. It meant doing in your civilian life something that made a difference in the lives of the men and women in combat. And admittedly, the way the war is today, we can't really do that anymore because these wars are BS. But you can still get back and make a difference in the lives of these guys once they get home. Maybe you're not a doctor. Well, that's awesome. That frees up time for the medical staff that you can go play chess or checkers with the guys and talk to them while they can focus on their job instead of having to, watch these guys and do non-medical related stuff. So get in contact with your VA, go help out, and actually support the troops. Take the bumper sticker off and go spend some time with them.